boss, the visionary. But before he ran an empire, he was a broke Detroit songwriter sitting in a room, writing hits that other people performed and walked away rich from. He wrote over 240 songs. Some came from heartbreak, some from a real-life love triangle nobody talks about. Some were finished in the middle of the night. And tonight, you're going to hear the real stories behind 10. Get into it. Number 10, Reet Petite, Jackie Wilson, 1957. And we are starting all the way back, 1957. Berry Gordy is nobody yet. He's a broke Detroit kid who dropped out of high school, tried professional boxing, served in the Korean War, opened a jazz record store, and watched it go bankrupt. He's working on a Ford assembly line, bolting car parts for a living, writing song ideas in his head while the machines run around him. Then his sister Gwen introduces him to a talent manager named Al Green, who manages a rising young singer from Detroit, a kid named Jackie Wilson. Jackie Wilson had just gone solo after leaving the doo-wop group Billy Ward and the Dominoes. He needed material, fast. Berry Gordy, his sister Gwen, and their writing partner Billy Davis locked in and wrote Jackie's debut solo single. They called it Reet Petite. The title came from a 1940s Louis Jordan jazz expression, reet, meaning fantastic. In the slang of that era, they gave it everything: a bouncing brass fanfare, call and response vocals, pure joyous swing. And Jackie Wilson, Mr. Excitement himself, sang it like he was born for it. Reet Petite was released in August 1957. It peaked at number 62 on the Billboard Hot 100, modest in America. But in the United Kingdom, it hit number 6. And here's where the story gets legendary. In 1986, 29 years later, a British animation studio made a claymation video for it. The BBC aired it. The British public went wild. Have you ever seen a girl for whom you sold your gift, for whom you fight for? The song was re-released. It shot straight to number 1, the UK Christmas number 1 in 1986, 3 years after Jackie Wilson had already died. And the royalties from Reet Petite, this song Berry Gordy wrote in a room as a nobody, gave him the seed money to start his own label. That label became Tamla Records. Tamla Records became Motown. Every hit, every Supremes record, every Stevie Wonder album, every Marvin Gaye classic, all of it traces back to this one song. Number 9, Lonely Teardrops, Jackie Wilson, 1958. And we're staying with Jackie Wilson because this story is too important to skip. By 1958, Berry Gordy and his writing team have already given Wilson a handful of hits. But Lonely Teardrops is different. This one changes everything. The song started life as a slow blues ballad, too heavy, too quiet. Wilson recorded it. Brunswick executives heard it. Nobody liked it. So they handed it to veteran arranger Dick Jacobs, who tore it apart and rebuilt it from scratch. The new version had a cha-cha flavor, that driving rhythm, that call and response energy, that signature guitar lick that cut straight through the radio, and Jackie Wilson sang it like his soul was on fire. Lonely Teardrops went to #1 on the R&B chart. #7, Pop. Sold over 1 million copies. Certified gold. Inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. Named one of Rolling Stone's 500 greatest songs of all time. But here's the detail that will stay with you. The money Gordy earned from writing this song, this hit he handed to Jackie Wilson, paid for the building that became Hitsville, USA. That little 2-story house on West Grand Boulevard in Detroit where Motown was born, funded by the royalties from this song. And then, on September 29th, 1975, Jackie Wilson was performing at the Latin Casino in New Jersey as part of Dick Clark's Good Old Rock and Roll Review. He was on stage singing Lonely Teardrops, and on the words, "My heart is crying," he collapsed, massive heart attack. The audience thought it was part of the show. They applauded. Jackie Wilson never fully recovered. He passed away on January 21st, 1984. The last song Gordy ever wrote for Jackie Wilson was the last song Jackie Wilson ever sang. Listen, 90% of you watching these videos right now ain't subscribed yet. If these stories are blowing your mind, imagine what you're missing. Hit subscribe, turn on that bell, and join the R&B fans who never miss a Groove Lens upload. #8, Money, That's What I Want. Barrett Strong, 1959. July 1959. Gordy is at his tiny studio, the home he's just converted into Hitsville, USA. He's sitting at the piano, just noodling, just thinking. His office administrator, Janie Bradford, is in the room, and Gordy starts talking about what's on his mind. Not love, not fame, money. That's all he wanted. That's all he needed. The best things in life are free, but try paying rent with that. They started writing it down, right there in the room. A young singer named Barrett Strong happened to be at Hitsville that day. He heard what they were building, walked over, took over the piano from Gordy, and the three of them built Money, That's What I Want in a single session. The drumming on the record, Benny Benjamin, who'd go on to anchor the legendary Funk Brothers. The guitar and bass, two high school kids who were just walking past on the street, heard the music coming through the open door, and wandered in. That's how Motown worked. That's how magic works. Money was released on Tamla in August 1959. It hit #2 on the R&B chart, #23, Pop, Motown's first national hit. And then, a young band from Liverpool heard it in a record shop. The Beatles played it in their live sets in Hamburg, Germany. In 1963, John Lennon sang lead on their studio recording for With the Beatles. And just like that, a song Gordy wrote on a piano in a converted Detroit house became one of the most covered songs in rock and roll history, listed at number 288 on Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Songs of All Time. From $800 borrowed to $1 million earned. That's the Gordy way. Number 7, Shop Around. The Miracles, 1960, number 7.
You're growing up now, pretty soon you'll take a bride.
And this one comes with a story that changed American music forever. 1960. Smokey Robinson writes a song in about 30 minutes. He calls it Shop Around. It's advice from a mother to her son. Don't fall for the first girl you find. Look around. Take your time.
Better shop around. Oh, yeah, you better.
Smokey thinks it's fine. He's about to give it to Barrett Strong, the same Barrett Strong who just recorded Money. But Berry Gordy stops him. That song is for you and the Miracles. So Smokey records it with the group, a slow bluesy version released locally in Detroit in September 1960. Gordy listens back. He can't sleep. He lies awake in his house, mind racing, thinking the song is too slow, not enough energy, not enough fire. So at 3 in the morning, Berry Gordy picks up the phone. He calls Smokey Robinson, wakes him up, wakes up every single Miracle, and tells them to get to Hitsville right now. In the middle of the night, they come in bleary-eyed, confused, and they record the song again. Faster, snappier, electric. Gordy himself played piano on the session. James Jamerson was on bass. Benny Benjamin on drums. The second version, the one you know, was released October 15th, 1960. Shop Around went to number 1 on the R&B chart and number 2 on the Hot 100.
Before you take a girl and say I do now.
It became Motown's first million-selling record, their first gold record, the song that proved a little Detroit label could compete with anyone in the country.
On the very first one, a pretty girl's.
Smokey Robinson said it himself. It really was the first bang-bang record the company had. It really got us established as a group.
You now, my mama told me you better.
Berry Gordy trusted his gut at 3 in the morning. And that instinct built an empire.
Do now, I'll make sure she's in love with it.
Number 6, All I Could Do Was Cry. Etta James, 1960. And this is where it gets personal. Before Motown had a single gold record, before Hitsville had its first superstar, Berry Gordy and his sister Gwen and their partner Billy Davis were writing for anybody who would listen. Then life handed them material they couldn't ignore.
Walk down the aisle.
Here's the situation. Etta James, the powerhouse singer from Los Angeles, had been in a relationship with a man named Harvey Fuqua. Billy Davis, Berry's writing partner, had been dating Berry's sister Gwen.
I heard them promise until death.
Then Harvey Fuqua started seeing Gwen Gordy. And Billy Davis lost his girl. To his writing partner's sister, you cannot make this up. Out of that heartbreak, that complicated real-life mess,
To a spark in each word.
the three of them wrote a song. A song about watching someone you love walk down the aisle with someone else, standing there helpless, powerless, and the only thing left to do is cry. They gave it to Etta James. Now, Etta James wasn't just a good singer, she was a force of nature, rawness, pain, power.
And all I could do.
And when she sang All I Could Do Was Cry, she sang it like she had lived every syllable. Because in a strange way, maybe she had too.
Waiting is over. Oh, oh.
All I Could Do Was Cry peaked at number 2 on the R&B chart in 1960, one of Etta James's earliest signature recordings. Proof that Berry Gordy didn't just write catchy pop hooks, he could write real bleeding human pain. Number 5, Do You Love Me? The Contours, 1962.
Around, and now I'm back to let you.
And this story has a twist that nobody planned. 1962. Berry Gordy writes a song, a dance song, an explosion of R&B energy built around all the hottest moves of the moment. The mashed potato, the twist. He writes it solo in about 20 minutes, and he writes it specifically for the Temptations. The Temptations in 1962 haven't had a single top 40 hit yet. Gordy believes in them. He wants to give them a smash. So he calls around, sends word. Where are the Temptations? And nobody knows. It turns out the Temptations had gone to church. A gospel concert at King Solomon's Church in Detroit. The Dixie Hummingbirds, the Harmonizing Four, the Highway QCs. They had no idea their whole future was waiting for them back at Hitsville. So Gordy gives up looking. And that's the exact moment 5 men from a group called the Contours walk through the door of Hitsville, USA, fresh off a weekend record hop. The Contours had already put out 2 singles that completely flopped. They were on the edge of being dropped from the label. Gordy looked at them, saw they were eager, knew they could move. He told them the Temptations couldn't be found, and I wanted to use them. The Contours nearly lost their minds. They hugged Gordy, they thanked him, they begged for the chance. Lead singer Billy Gordon stepped to the microphone and let out a scream that sounded like pure Detroit soul running at full voltage.
Watch me now.
Do You Love Me was released on Gordy Records in the summer of 1962. It debuted at number 100 on the Hot 100, and then it kept climbing and climbing. It hit number 3 pop, number 1 R&B, sold over 1 million copies. Gold record, the fastest rising single in Motown history to that point, and the Temptations, they didn't get their first top 40 hit until 2 years later because they were in church. One afternoon changed 2 groups' destinies forever. That's not just music history, that's fate. Number 4, I Want You Back. The Jackson 5, 1969. It's 1969. Motown's greatest writing team, Holland Dozier Holland, had walked out the door the year before. Royalty dispute, creative differences, gone. Berry Gordy needed a new team, fast. 3 writers, Freddie Perrin, Phonce Mizell, and Deke Richards, had just written a song called I Want to Be Free. It was originally written for Gladys Knight. Then Gordy thought about giving it to Diana Ross. Neither happened, because Berry Gordy heard that song and something clicked. He thought about a teenage kid named Frankie Lyman, the child star from the 1950s. He told the team, write this for someone like that, young, hungry, desperate, a kid trying to get his girl back. They rewrote it completely, changed the title, changed the storyline. Gordy himself jumped in, rearranging, restructuring, shaping every note. And then they brought in an 11-year-old boy from Gary, Indiana, a kid named Michael Jackson, to sing it. The producer recalled knowing the song hit a high E flat and thinking, this kid is really going to have to sing. Michael did, and the world was never the same. I Want You Back was released October 7th, 1969. It hit #1 on January 31st, 1970. #1 R&B for 4 weeks. Sold over 6 million copies worldwide. Inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. Named number 104 on Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Songs of All Time. Pitchfork called the chorus possibly the best chord progression in pop music history. The Daily Telegraph called it arguably the greatest pop record of all time. And the songwriting credit? Listed simply as The Corporation. No individual names, no Berry Gordy Jr., no nothing. Because Gordy had just watched Holland Dozier Holland become famous as producers and demand more money than he wanted to pay. He wasn't about to let that happen again. So he buried his name behind a corporate credit while writing one of the greatest pop songs ever recorded. Number 2, You've Made Me So Very Happy, Brenda Holloway, 1967. And this one has drama, heartbreak, a lawsuit, and a song that became bigger after someone else sang it. Brenda Holloway was a Los Angeles singer, Motown's first West Coast signing. She played violin and cello. She had the voice of a hurricane. But by 1967, she was fading at the label. The Supremes were getting all the attention. Brenda kept being told to wait her time. Then her boyfriend quit her, and instead of falling apart, Brenda called Berry Gordy and said, I want to write a song. She wrote it with her sister Patrice, a revenge song, a declaration that she was happy. She was going to be fine. This man was crazy to leave her. Producer Frank Wilson helped shape it. Berry Gordy stepped in, adjusted a few notes, and took a co-writing credit. Then Gordy and Brenda argued throughout the entire recording session over how the song should sound. Oh, but it seems that you're even in my dreams. Brenda wanted it raw, powerful, horn-driven. Gordy made it smoother, refined, restrained. Brenda lost the argument, and that confrontation was the final push that made her walk out of Motown for good. You've Made Me So Very Happy peaked at number 39 pop, number 40 R&B, decent, but not a smash. Loving you is where it's at. Then in 1969, 2 years later, jazz rock band Blood, Sweat and Tears covered it. They recorded it exactly how Brenda wanted it, raw, blasting horns, emotional, powerful. Love you so much it seems that you're even in my dreams. It shot to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, kept from number 1 only by The Fifth Dimension. Certified gold, 1 million sales. Their album won Album of the Year at the Grammys. Brenda Holloway watched all of it happen from the outside. She later sued Berry Gordy over the royalties. She won, and Brenda Holloway said it herself. Looking back at what could have been, I wrote it to be like Blood, Sweat and Tears recorded it. But Berry insisted on his version. So glad you came into. History proved her right, and history also proved that even when Berry Gordy got it wrong, the song was still great enough to win twice. Number 1, I'll Be There, the Jackson 5, 1970. And this is the one. It's the summer of 1970. I Want You Back, number 1. A BC, number 1. The Love You Save, number 1. 3 straight number 1s. Exactly what Berry Gordy promised. Now, Gordy had to decide, go back to the corporation formula or try something completely different. A songwriter named Bob West had written the bones of a ballad. Something quiet, something tender. Motown's Los Angeles producer Hal Davis heard it and felt it, but knew it needed more. So he called another writer, Willie Hutch, in the middle of the night. Hal Davis told him, Gordy likes the title. He doesn't like this song.
Let me fill your heart with joy.
We record in the morning. Willie Hutch stayed up all night, rewriting, rebuilding, refining. He showed up at 8 in the morning with a completely restructured song and walked straight into the studio. Berry Gordy heard it, liked it, made his own adjustments, took his co-writing credit, and told them to cut it. And here's the detail you'll never forget. Gordy told Michael Jackson to sing a specific line. Just look over your shoulder, as a nod to the Four Tops classic, Reach Out, I'll Be There. Michael flubbed it. He sang, just look over your shoulders, honey. Plural, shoulders. Berry Gordy let it stay in the final mix. I'll Be There was released in August 1970. It went to number 1 on the Hot 100, stayed there for 5 weeks. Number 1, R&B, sold 4 million copies.
I'll be there.
It made the Jackson 5 the first recording act in history to have their first 4 singles all go to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. No group had ever done that. Not the Beatles, not the Supremes, not anyone. Inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 1999, and in 1992, Mariah Carey performed it live on MTV Unplugged. Her version went back to number 1, 22 years after the original. Michael Jackson called I'll Be There one of his 3 favorite songs he ever recorded at Motown.
Don't you know, baby, yeah, yeah.
Written in the middle of the night, finished by morning, shaped by Berry Gordy, the man who refused to put his own name on it. That is the greatest songwriter you never gave enough credit to.
I'll be there.